Good day, beautiful people, and welcome back to Life Treasures and Golden Moments. This is Natalie Silva. I hope you each had happy holidays with friends and family and made some treasured moments to store away in your special book of memories. The holiday season can be a hectic time of year, as you all know, for many of us, and after all the excitement and festivities come to a close for another season, our lives become routine and a bit quieter. Life at times can seem a bit bland or lackluster. However, here we are in the midst of winter and moving into a new year, which gives each of us the opportunity to rest and to think about our lives and how not to conform to our old ways of our habits and thoughts, but to seek out new ways and new opportunities for renewal of spirit, which will provide us with the energy and the zest for life to start anew. During this month's podcast, I would like to share with you stories of lives that are touched and hearts that are renewed, bringing hope and the renewal of spirit. It is my wish that these stories will inspire you and give you food for thought in your journey to start the new year with an enlightened heart. My story today is Life's Recipes, and it was written by Kimberly Ripley. As if I didn't already have enough to do, my grandmother wanted me to drive to her house, 2 hours away. "I have something very important I want you to have," she told me. I was supposed to go to a party that night, and I'd been hoping to get my nails done beforehand. Now I wouldn't have any time. I speculated that Granny might be liquidating her assets, which I knew to be considerable. In addition to cash that was often found stashed between mattresses or in a cookie jar, Grandma also owned valuable antiques and jewelry. I envisioned her handing me her grandmother's priceless brooch, or presenting me with the oak armoire that had been in the family since the 1800s. I would have been especially grateful for cash, as my own supply had diminished from a flow to a trickle. It seemed that as much as I worked, my paychecks just couldn't keep up with my expenses. My credit card debt was piling up, and any cash I got seemed to slip through my fingers. My expectations of Grandma's gift increased as I got closer to her house. When I arrived, filled with anticipation of treasure that would soon be mine, my grandma led me into the kitchen and handed me an old rusty recipe box. Its contents were yellowed and musty, and some of the papers crumbled with the lightest touch of my fingertips. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked my grandmother. "You're supposed to kiss your grandmother on the cheek and thank her for the lovely gift," she replied. "But, Granny, it's an ugly green box with recipes, and they smell. You know I hate to cook," I exclaimed, becoming exasperated. "I'm sorry you're so disappointed," my grandmother replied, looking at me with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Perhaps you'd better go." After spending mere moments at my grandmother's house, I found myself driving back home. I felt a bit dumbstruck by the whole exchange. I wasn't sure if what I was feeling mirrored the pain in Granny's eyes, or if I was indeed angry that my gift hadn't been of more value. The one true emotion I recognized was disappointment. It always felt like I was setting myself up just to be let down again. I usually blame my parents. They've made so many broken promises to me. "We'll be back from Rome in time to see your play," they tell me, and then finally scored when I scored the lead, but they didn't come. "We wouldn't miss your graduation for the world," Mother had exclaimed when I graduated from Columbia University, but they missed it. When they promised year after year to come back to the States and spend Christmas with me, but called at the last minute with some far-flung excuse, I simply swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "Sure, I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. Not to top it all off, I had hurt my grandmother's feelings when she had been the only constant in my life. What was Granny thinking? Was there some sign of dementia setting in? She knew my culinary expertise was non-existent, so why would she give me a box of recipes? Returning home exhausted from the drive, I ran a bath and put the kettle on for tea. After soaking in some steamy suds, I curled up on the couch with my tea and my old tabby cat, Lyle, recapping the day's events. I picked up the recipe box and began thumbing through its contents. I remember Granny making butterscotch pie, I remarked out to Lyle. When Uncle Ty and Uncle Ben came home from Alaska, she made all their favorites. What a feast! The cat merely stretched, turned himself around twice, and settled cozily on my lap. Pickle Willie and mustard pickles. Mother always made them in the summer, and we brought them to Granny's for the 4th of July. I remembered Granny's golden chiffon cake and how she made a well in the middle of the flour. That's where she'd pour the oil and the egg yolks and water. She'd always let me stir the batter and lick the spoon. I could almost smell the sweet aroma of polka dots baking in the old wood and coal-fired stove. Grandma would whip the egg whites until they looked like snowy mountain peaks. "Looking like Coal Mountain after a good dustin'," she would always say. Then I would carefully place chocolate chips on each tiny mound of fluff. Sometimes my cousins Joe and Lynn were there too, and 3 of us would wait in anticipation for warm, chocolatey treats to be done. After they baked for a half an hour, Grandma would leave them to cool on the windowsill on the back porch, and she'd always feign surprise when she returned to put them in the cookie jar and found that several had mysteriously disappeared. I wondered how long it had been since I called or written Joe or Lynn. Since I was an only child, they had been like sisters to me. We used to spend weeks on end at Granny's house during summer vacations. How funny to think of them after all this time. Continuing through the fragile scraps of paper, I found the recipe for the birthday cake Granny had made me every single year that I was in grade school. "Cream cake!" I cried, startling poor Lyle, who gave up on his nap and slipped off into the bedroom. Cream cake was a rich yellow cake served with a thick layer of whipped cream frosting. My grandmother kept it refrigerated so it was firm and chilled. It was one of my favorite treats as a child. Granny and I had spent the most magical Christmases together while my parents were away. We trimmed the tree with handmade ornaments and baked spicy molasses cookies. Even that recipe sat before me now in the box on my coffee table. Suddenly, in the midst of my fond memories, I found myself sobbing uncontrollably. I realized that my grandmother had known exactly what she was doing when she'd give me that recipe box. I'd been so selfish. I cried out aloud, "Oh, Granny, I hope you'll forgive me." Something my grandmother told me when I was a little girl crept into my thoughts. If God can forgive our mistakes, then there's no reason the rest of us can't forgive them too. How important those words sounded now. Why hadn't I been more understanding with my parents? Daddy's operation had been only days before my graduation, and Mother just didn't dare leave him. And they did send flowers, and on opening night when their flight was canceled in Rome, I felt so ashamed. Granny's call had led me to jump to conclusions, and I assumed I would have a newfound financial security. I thought her gift would help me free up from debt and worry and fear. Instead, Granny made me realize that the greatest treasure slipping through my fingers was a relationship with a family I loved. Time and distance had allowed me to grow cold and cynical, but the recipe box had thawed my heart. My eyes blurry with tears, I picked up the phone, dialed Granny's number. "Hello, dear," my grandmother answered. "Granny, you knew it was me?" I asked. "Yes, dear, I had a feeling you'd call. We've always been kindred spirits, you and I." "You're right, Granny," I said, wiping my eyes. "I think God's reason for giving me a granddaughter was to melt away some of the pain we humans cause each other. I watched and waited while you grew, and I saw you acting like you had it all figured out. Though I knew you were troubled when I saw the path you were taking, I started to get worried. Granny, I'm so sorry. I guess I've become so wrapped up in money and material things and success that I lost sight of what's really important, I confess. You haven't lost sight. You simply lost your way for a little while. I knew the recipe box would rekindle some of those old warm feelings," she said. "But how did you know?" I asked. "I know you don't like to cook, but the recipes in that box are much more than what they seem. They're bits and pieces of who you are. I thought the memories they evoked might help you reconnect with the past and with the people who are most important to you." "I kept thinking about Joe and Lynn," I said, "and I remembered some of the things Mother and I did when I was little." That box contains a big chunk of your history, Granny continued. It contains mine and your mother's and now yours. Someday I hope you'll have a precious little child who will grow up having cream cake at birthday parties and Pickle Willie on the 4th of July. I hope so too, Granny, I told her. I hope so too. This is Natalie Silva with Life Treasures and Golden Moments, sharing with you true stories of miracles and inspiration. Thank you for listening today. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you next time. Take care now. In the event that you may have a story of a miracle or a story of an inspiration that you'd like to share with us, please contact me at angelswhisper11@gmail.com. Thank you again and have a great day.